Hi, everybody. Welcome to Virtual Coffee. This show is going to be a little different than everything else that I've done because it's not about hot button issues. This is about something that we should all be taking an interest in, and that's careers. This show will be highlighting different people from different industries across the world with different goals, different visions, whether it's from a 9 to 5 position or it's an entrepreneur that works round the clock to build something that matters. This show is going to cover it all. Thank you for being here for the first episode. The gentleman that I have with me today is one of the most inspiring young people that I have seen in my life. He is a young entrepreneur from Denmark. I have worked with him personally. He has done work for Deliver, my company, and we have grown to be friends since then. I couldn't think of a better way to kick this show off than with somebody that sets a bar, not just for themselves, but for young people in general, in my opinion, and is destined for absolute greatness. Please welcome my guest, Tobias Nielsen. Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing pretty well. A bit exhausted. I think on our 11 in front of the desktop today.
Man, yeah, because it's 4 p.m. here, so what? It's a little after 10 p.m. there.
Yes, sir.
Wow. Yeah. So, and you started your day when?
Around 10 a.m., 9 a.m.
All right. Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of your MO, though. I mean,
Yeah, that's mostly it.
you work you work yourself to the bone, and then small break when you actually need it. That's
yeah. I try and
that's
do
why I
one
picked
day
you
a
for
week.
this.
I appreciate that. I
Well,
think
I mean, it's first episode. Got to have somebody good on, man. Why not one of the most inspiring young people that I have the privilege of calling a colleague? So
talent is useless without discipline. I think it literally doesn't matter how good you are just through genetics if you're not leveraging it. And I find it to be a moral obligation. Might be a personal
absolutely.
choice, but
So before we really jump into it, just kind of give us the broad strokes. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, your company.
no. So my name is Tobias. I'm the owner and founder of Anthem Agency. We're a AI automation company working primarily with the supply chain logistics industry. We specialize in supply chain logistics and have been doing it for 3 or so years now. Right now,
You're how old?
I'm 19 years old. Been running Anthem for about 2 years now,
Since
2.5
since you were
years.
six, I was gonna say since you were 16, 17.
17, right? It's not legal for me to own a company in Denmark before I was 18. So it was in my dad's name for a while. Got it transferred to a year ago.
Awesome. What inspired you to start the agency?
I think the agency was a natural byproduct of the work that I was doing. So I've always had an affinity to take on as much duty as I can. And this started at a very young age, right? At 13, which is the minimum age you can get a job in Denmark. So month 1 of being 13, I got my first job. And at 15, I had like 3 jobs at once. And at about the 16, 17 years of age, I started getting very interested in IT and computers and like automations. And I had the opportunity with the local chess club. They needed a new website built. And, you know, they weren't interested in paying some contracting agency to do it for them. So they looked around and was there to build a website for them. And that's how I kind of got my first client.
Really?
Um, they came to me and I built out this website for not a lot of money, like $1,000 or $2,000. Took me half a year. Uh, but it was a very useful thing for me to learn, and it got me kind of hungry for that chase. And I
Yeah.
got into the entire agency space then, and it evolved into
What it is now.
yeah.
So backing up, you said you got your first job pretty much right after you turned 13.
Yeah.
What was your first job?
I was a paper delivery boy, so I went around with papers in the
Really?
winter, in the summer. It was horrible, like absolutely horrible.
So like newspapers?
Newspapers, yeah, for a year.
Dang. Wow, that's wild.
Yeah,
You don't see, I mean, you don't see much of that here. I mean, obviously, printed press has kind of died off and everything's kind of transitioned to social media and digital consumption, but that's actually super cool. So that was your first job. You said by 15 you had a couple different jobs. What else did you do in that time period?
right. So we had to do with the school. We had to take internship. So I got to the local bicycle shop, and I got experience there. After 5 days there, they realized that I was relatively incompetent at fixing the bikes up, but they did notice that I had one particular skill, and that was on the IT side. So they got me to upgrade their computers. So split them apart, upgrade with new RAM, new CPU, new GPU, set up CCTV cameras, wire their Ethernet cables, update their Office package, sync all their emails up, handle client inquiries,
Wow,
like all kinds of random IT tasks, which suited me
that's
much better.
crazy. Right.
So I would
And
like
this is when you were like 15?
16, yeah, 15. Yeah.
Wow.
At the same time, I also started outreaching on Facebook. So I put out like a blanket basically saying tutoring. So I would do tutoring for local kids a couple years younger than me. And because I had almost straight A's in all relevant subjects, I would be able to take on students, right? And I think in total, I've tutored about 13 or 14 different kids.
Wow.
Some
Doing
of
the
them,
same kind of stuff that you were doing.
yeah, some of them,
That's awesome.
s- yeah. Actually, yesterday, one of the students reached out to me, and we had a like 1.5 hour chat about mathematics. He's like
Oh, wow.
5 years older than when I met him, which
Oh,
is
wow.
yeah.
So you started out with web design, um, and then where did it go from there? I mean, obviously your first project was building that website. Um, how did it evolve from website building into what it was when I met you, which was like LinkedIn
Automation, yeah.
outreach and marketing? So how did it transition from web design to that?
Yeah. So one of my core skills is resourcefulness. So looking at a given chessboard, looking at a given situation and evaluating what is the best stuff from here. And understanding that I'd rather take action than I would sit and meddle in this illusion that I can make the perfect choice. So at that time, I was doing websites, right? Because I had custom coded HTML websites when I was like 11. And that was kind of what I was doing, right? Because I knew nothing else. I knew nothing else. So that was what I was doing. And by building 3, 4, 5 something websites for a couple clients, I realized that it doesn't truly matter the quality of the website if no one is on it. The only thing that really matters in an attention economy like we're in is the leads actually visiting the page. You can have an ugly website and still convert really well.
Uh-huh.
So I got into
We see it every day
yeah.
with
So
massive companies.
yeah, it doesn't really matter if you have a proper like if you have the basics, right? If you build enough trust, if you have a solid, conversion
Yeah.
mechanism, the rest doesn't really matter.
Right.
So I started looking into things like SEO, Google Ads, and I learned how to outsource and delegate that properly. And I took on a couple of clients doing PPC, like Google pay-per-click ads. That went pretty well. And SEO, search engine optimization. And we
Yeah.
did like 15 profile optimizations for that.
That's so wild to me because SEO in and of itself is a tall task.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that goes into it. You could do just SEO for a living
Yeah.
and have a full plate and
Yeah.
make great money. It's wild, right? So where did you learn that side of things? Was it all just kind of self-taught? Was it YouTube videos? Was it podcasts? Because obviously that's not something that just comes second nature. I mean, I'm sure to some people it does, but
It doesn't. Anyone who says that something is easier, they're lying. Like either they're incompetent or they're lying, and
right.
pick one, right? I I have the conception that I don't need to be perfect at everything. I need to be clever enough that I can find people who are better at that given thing and give the task to them.
Yeah.
So my mentality has always been be competent enough so that I can get other people to build out my portfolio for me, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting, right? Because when we were doing websites, yeah, I get all the credit for building the websites, but I
Right.
had a team of 6 people building the website, right? It was like I managed them, I managed
Yeah.
the SEO, I managed the designers, I managed like all the different copywriters, all these different parts.
Mhm.
But I didn't like if you get me to open up Figma right now, I can do the basics. I would be able
Right.
to create designs, but it's
Right.
not to the proficiency where I would go out and sell my own time for it. Right? I wouldn't.
Right. Well, I mean, and honestly, that's still at the end of the day, yeah, sure, you have other people building out your portfolio for you, in a sense, but at the end of the day, the end customer is still getting a service provided. So whether it's you actually sitting there behind the keys or not, or you outsource it, or you have employees that do it, at the end of the day, you're still providing that service to them one way or the other, and they wouldn't have that otherwise. So, I mean, there's two sides to that coin.
Mm,
I don't necessarily look at it as someone building out your portfolio for you.
yeah.
So I don't be so harsh on yourself with that. I think what you're
Hmm.
doing is the right thing. You're delegating.
No. And I think that's I think the reason why I frame it as building out my portfolio is because I learn a lot more by trying to articulate the actual issue than I would by just building out something myself. So I
Right.
found that the main difficulty with most problems that companies have is articulating what the actual, and I mean actual issue is, and then articulating the action plan that will resolve that issue. That's 80% of solving an issue. For most cases, there are actually hard things that you need like a
Right.
PhD student to do, but most things, most companies are like dealing with on a day-to-day basis. In reality, you could have, some average guy, an average developer would be able to build out that tool, build out that solution if you articulate the issue well enough. And that's
Right.
a skill set where I've tried to leverage on heavily.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. And that's a skill set that not a lot of people really possess. I mean, you see business owners all the time that you know, they try to stay on an island and they want to do everything themselves and they want, they want control over it. I mean, a lot of people don't know how to delegate. So, I mean, kudos, you figured it out really young.
Uh, I'm also going to be humble here because I haven't fully figured it out. Right? I'm not that good yet.
Of
That's
course
still
not.
one of my main issues that I'm dealing with. I've always had the thought that if you can't be a good follower, you can't really be a good leader. So, as I
No,
mentioned
that's
before,
100% accurate.
right? Like if you can't, if you don't even have enough technical knowledge to explain the issue, you can't solve it, right? And if you don't have the personality type or the personality traits to be able to follow someone else, follow a common denominational goal, then how are you going to get someone else to follow a goal that you've set up? The
Yeah.
structure for articulating actions is based in your own capability to execute on those actions, which
Yeah.
is kind of interesting, right? Because when you look at like Roman, like when you look at the Roman Empire, they had a huge military, and one of the ways that they would select who would get into leadership positions would be purely their ability to follow orders and some sort of technical ability, right? They need to be competent, but they needed
Yeah.
to understand the actual structure of war and actual structure of hierarchy.
Yeah.
If you can evaluate the quality of one thing compared to something else, you can evaluate all things. So let's say you have 100 people or 100 soldiers. If you can say that this soldier 10, is better than soldier 15, you can almost by definition articulate a hierarchy of skill based on everyone in that list. So let's say 15 is better than 10. You have internally created a list of reasoning as for why that person is better than the other one. And by making that one judgment, you make a judgment on all of them. And that hierarchy, that judgment can then be used to select the best of the best, right? And that core fundamental truth of if you can judge one thing, you can judge everything, actually ties very heavily into what we would call moral relativism. And moral relativism is kind of a atheistic, an atheistic term, which I don't personally follow, and I can't equip myself with this belief. But it is the alleged truth that you have your own internal moral hierarchy. So moral relativism is, I think that chocolate tastes better than almonds or whatever, or sugar. And it's like, you could say that, but moral relativism then argues that your opinion does not correlate and cannot affect anyone else's opinions. Whereas something like moral absolutism, right? Like Christianity has, right? Where there's a divine or there's a set of truth that everyone has to follow, The statement, at least in the Bible, right? There's a lot of truth statements. There's a lot of don't do this instead. By making one truth statement and asserting that as fact, you're making an assertment on all other things. So when you read something like the Bible or read a piece of historical text, you can actually articulate the entire knowledge belief and the entire moral value set that that person has based on quite a few number of beliefs, which is very, very interesting from like a historical perspective. And I'm working a lot with this, um, trying to integrate that kind of truth with new technology. So we're in the process of building out a dynamic graph RAG agent. So a dynamic graph, so it's like a spider web effectively with different dots, with different pieces of information that is hyper-connected. So the information is hyper-connected in this map. RAG, so dynamic graph RAG. RAG stands for retrieval augmentation generation. And it's a way for AI, large language models, to retrieve relevant data based on a prompt. So we use vector databases. So it's a way of normalizing large volumes of data and giving them a value. The large language model can use the RAG to look into the RAG, like the dynamic graph database. So we have this map with all this information, all these different truth statements. We can use this RAG technology to find truth related to the claim that is made by the user. And when we find one piece of truth, because it's a map, it's like interconnected, we then can connect it to other pieces of truth, and we can make using linear logic, we can make a map of reasoning. And this is different, and this is something I'm playing around with myself. I have a developer working like a couple hours a day on this project. It's very, very cool. We have some very interesting graphs. And what it allows me to do is I can have an AI agent, and I can have hyper complex conversations with it where it takes these truth statements that I've logged in. So I have more than 500 different claims, truth statements that is hyper connected based on the actual etymology of the words and the phonology of the words. So a whole bunch of technical analysis on the actual statements, which allows me to have conversations, and it'll basically just bully me because it's able to see patterns that I can't even see, because it connects 50 different quotes together that I've defined as truth statements.
Now, that's all stuff like on the back end there. So you're still playing with the reasoning. So as far as like the real world application, where is something like that used?
Yeah. So this is something. So I always spend about 20% of my time on projects where I don't directly correlate it with revenue, and this is one of them. What this can be used for is storing data with very high precision. So, for example, one of the things that I've been planning on using this for is all communication on all platforms for me. So every single time I get an email, every single time I get a WhatsApp message, every time LinkedIn, Slack, any platform, it automatically adds that to the graph database. And I have this hyper connected database of my life and the conversations that I've had. And now I have something that knows my personal relationships better than I do. And that combined with a personal CRM, driven by AI, that again also takes all messages back and forth and analyzes for contact information. This is something we have active right now, I'm using for myself. It scans all communication back and forth for contact information and automatically hyperlinks different pieces of contact information, right? So the email is automatically linked with the WhatsApp and the name and the LinkedIn URL, and all these different pieces of information are connected without me having to do it myself. With normal CRMs, you get a new piece of contact information. You have to manually go into the right person and add it in there. Okay, somewhat useful.
Right. Yeah.
The more standardized structures of data that you can have with useful information, the more powerful your AI agents will be. AI agents, primary limiter is the data that you provide them. So when we're able to give them personal, keyword personal data that no one else has access to and is relevant to me, I get such a, I actually get a major advantage, right? Because I'm able to have leverage that I wouldn't even be able to think was possible. So let's say I have
Right.
the personal CRM. I have the truth statements. I have transcription of every single call I've ever been on. So kind of my tone of voice, my personality, which words do I use? How often do I speak? What's the speed? Like, what's the rate of my words? What's when I type on my keyboard, what's my word per minute count there? What words do I usually misspell? And if you get enough of these data sources, you can do something which is quite new in this industry, and it is called quantum mirroring. And what it's trying to do, keyword trying, is to replicate yourself. And when I say self, I mean the cogito. So the traditional like full meaning, right? Cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. It's like the actual self, like not what you're trying to pretend that you are, the actual core fundamental being is what you're trying to achieve. And my goal with this entire ecosystem effectively is allowing me to be able to have complex conversations. The reason I want to have complex conversations is because, at least according to Jordan Peterson, I believe this to be true as well. Having a conversation, like articulating thought through words, is the closest thing that you can have to prayer. Like prayer, by definition, is articulating yourself through words, and that articulation forces you to think. You cannot have a proper articulated sentence without thinking. So that drives it back to the Immanuel Kant, right? Sapere aude. I have a chain with it on. Dare to think. Most people are so stuck in their own delusions. It's actually hard for them to think truly. And I mean truly think.
Yeah.
Most people go full days without thinking at all. Like at all. And you have the daily, natural thoughts, but that's not thinking.
You're not challenging your brain.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that internal monologue. And this is something that's very core actually to the Christian belief. The Christian, at least Orthodox, goes very heavy into this, the belief that images of the mind, so like illustrations, thoughts that you have, like visual illusions in the mind of dreams and stuff like this, is sent by the devil, literally. It is things that are trying to take you away from that which is true. And the only way that you can return to yourself, your cogito, your literal self, is through your monologue, through thinking, through having an internal conversation. Basically, anything that goes beyond conversation enters into at least illusion, if not direct sin.
Yeah. That's so powerful. I mean, because it's 100% true. Everything you do is guided by that internal monologue. I mean, every choice you make is guided by that. But so coming back to the concept of AI, and being able to essentially replicate yourself. One of the big conversations happening all in every industry, and among privacy advocate groups is you're training an LLM on this data. If every interaction that you have, whether it's through WhatsApp, social media, etc., is being run through this
machine.
large language model, how would you address privacy concerns?
I would say there are 3 layers to that question. So the third layer, and I think the most humbling one, is privacy is an illusion for stupid people. Iranian nuclear physicists, they were studying how to make nuclear bombs. They were some of the most clever people in the world. They got caught because in their central processing unit, in their computer, in their CPU, there was a chip, and that chip is remote controlled by Intel, and the American government just contacted Intel, just, hey, we need access, and boom, there's kernel access to your entire PC. Guess what they found? Oh, gee, these guys,
they're building a bomb. These guys are trying to build a bomb. Yeah.
And guess who the US military pulled up on? So
I think that's interesting, because that was a detail that was not mentioned at all in the media or in the coverage of it, of like, hey, where did we find this out? Well, it was a computer leak. Like, that's basically what it is. So, I mean,
it's a backdoor.
I definitely can see your point. Privacy is kind of an illusion at this point. We have mobile devices that we keep on our person. We essentially have an ankle monitor everywhere we go, willingly. Phones track everything we do everywhere we go. The idea of privacy in 2025 is kind of silly. But I guess looking at it from kind of this perspective of, you're working with a company, there is, proprietary information, something that would be protected by an NDA. What kind of security and safeguards are there with this technology now that would prevent what would be considered proprietary information or something otherwise covered by a non-disclosure agreement from being used in other areas of business? So, being able to use one company's proprietary information to pitch to another company. And so those kinds of safeguards and security measures, how do you prevent that from happening when you're using their data?
So that would be the second layer, right? And I would say that's probably one of the most important use cases for most of the work that I would be doing. Okay?
Right.
And there's only one true way around it. And that is through self-hosting. Hosting everything yourself is the only true way. Most of these companies, most of these like OpenAI, Claude, like Anthropic, or Perplexity, all of these guys, they have API, and their actual regulation in these API are optimized for major companies, right? If they didn't have this regulation in place, no one would be using them, right? There'd be no reason to rent from them. Okay, right. So, if you're using the API, broadly speaking, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Though, if you're just using a normal chat, right? Just go on chatgpt.com and type there. Yes, by default, I think they are not training the models on them. So other people can't just ask, hey, what is Robert Herr's trade secrets that I need to copy, right? And it'll spit it out. That's not going to happen by default.
Right.
But OpenAI still have legal access to everything. None of it is private on there. And it can't be, because that wouldn't make sense from from OpenAI's perspective. It wouldn't make sense. They need access to that information for UI, UX, and user experience optimization, right? And analysis,
so obviously self-hosting is is
Is the way.
very improbable, and
No,
very out of reach for quite a few people.
no.
Um,
You can use
most
something like
businesses, unless you're a massive company.
Docker as a alternative. When I say self-hosting, there's two layers to that. There's a physical PC for like $5,000, or there's something like Docker. There's a bunch of different variations of Docker, but where you basically rent out computer space from them.
Mhm. Okay.
And that's probably the most useful thing for most people. We run
Mhm.
all of our NADN, which is the automation tool that we use. We're kind of specialists in NADN. We have the ability to both run it from the self-hosted, right, on Docker, or from the NADN hosted one. So we're paying hundreds of euros just to have like the service running, not to mention any of the other tools we plug into. And
Right.
yeah, it's
And so, moving into kind of what you're doing now, you went from doing, LinkedIn outreach and marketing, and a lot of that, I think that's kind of where you really started having to use these kinds of automations.
yeah,
Um, is that where you kind of realized you had a knack for this sort of thing?
I think that's accurate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
what started the transition from doing like LinkedIn marketing to what you're doing now? And what is kind of like the average job or the average partnership, contract, however you want to describe it. What does that look like, and what are you
yeah.
what service are you bringing, and what value are you bringing to the table when you work with a company?
So it's actually a quite interesting story on how I switched away from the LinkedIn automation side, like the marketing side, to the general automation side. So it goes back to this resourcefulness. I try and take action once I get new information. And at this point, I was in Las Vegas for Manifest Logistics. So I was
Mhm.
going around pitching these automations, like these Shopify LinkedIn automations. And I'd have my laptop and I would be pitching these automations. And one of the 50 or so people I spoke with there asked me, "Hey, are you guys using NADN?" And I had no idea what that was because I hadn't heard of it before, and it was a new tool back then. This is like
Right.
8 months ago, 9 months ago.
Right.
And I got obsessed with it. I got back to the hotel room, and instead of enjoying my time in Vegas, right, I paid like $4,000 for that trip. I like I was sitting in my hotel room all of the days after I learned that, from like when I got home 6 p.m. till about 4 a.m. in the morning, 2 a.m. in the morning, whatever, playing with NADN. And it like I just got so obsessed with it, and it was so the opportunities there were unmatched.
Right.
We still do the LinkedIn automation, right? It is
Right.
we still do that. That's still a part of our service, right? If that's needed for the client side.
Right.
But that can also be done through NADN.
Yeah.
So we basically expanded the scope of what we are able to do. And that has given us the opportunity to build these unfair advantages. I have the advantage of pretty high creativity when it comes to implementing technology.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, they're looking for unique ways where they can get an unfair advantage against their
Hmm.
competition. If they are doing
Yeah.
something that no one else is doing, they have an advantage. Because right now, most people are playing with the
Right.
same kind of deck of hands, right? They're playing with the same WMS, FMS, TMS, ATS, whatever tool they're using. They have the
Uh-huh.
same, if not very similar to us, all their competitors. And like if they get undercut, they're effectively
Right.
getting replaced within a month. Looking apart from like customer service, some customer
Mm.
retention, there's definitely some
Right.
some quality metric. But
Yeah.
broadly speaking, and that's kind of where we come in. My goal is to try and create a moat around companies, really trying to make the company more scalable, less kind of employee, like less hiring pressure to get more employees on, increase revenue per employee, reduce stress for the founder so they can work on the right things, have your employees work on the right things. Like all of these different things are things that we can implement, and it makes a large impact.
Right.
So that's why kind of our mission statement is to build unfair advantages for the supply chain logistics industry.
Yeah.
The way we do this is something that most of my clients have found really nice, and we usually give them two options: on a per project basis, where we give a quote and then it's split out over 4 payments, or what most of my clients say is really nice, and we actually like prefer doing, is a no cost upfront deal, and then we work on a hourly basis. Me, my consultants, my developers, and my project managers paid on a hourly basis, and our goal is to basically implement the tools that you want. So instead of having this back and forth every single time for a new project, hey, this is going to cost exactly this much, and this is the exact date. Like, what we're able to do is move a lot quicker. Every single time there's a change that needs to be done, we just get it done. Every single time there's a revision, we just get it done. And it removes a lot of the bureaucracy that most other companies are facing.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, that's generally what slows things down. I mean, the bigger the company, the more red tape, the slower they are at getting anything done.
Yeah.
So as far as like where you're at now and say like a 5-year plan, where do you want Anthem to be in 5 years, and where are you at now?
Right. So when I just started out, I had a plan, and it was a 3-step plan. And I just finished step 1. I'm very close to finishing step 2, not fully yet there. And then there's step 3. So the first step was, getting like a base client base, like getting some sort of market validation on the service that I provide is solid, right? People want it.
Right.
There's a use case here. And the idea there was get about 25 or so clients, I think 30 or so clients, before I could, how do I put it, move on to the next stage, right? Before I even consider scaling. And the next stage for me is scaling the company with me still being a major part of it. Doing my very best to get really good people placed in the right spots and get enough high quality clients who are winners, like people who want to win and are willing to build these unfair advantages, right? They need to be, the company structure that we work with needs to be structured in a way where they want to win, right? And that's not a given.
Right.
Like a third of the calls I get on, their goal isn't to grow. Their goal is to just sit there doing fine, and it's like very interesting. So we want to work with winners because we can quantify the results, and when we can quantify the results, life is easy, right?
Right. And so obviously a lot of the back end stuff, as far as AI goes, there's a lot of setup time that goes into that. So from signing a deal to being up and running, what's your general time frame? So if it's on like for example, if it's on a per project basis, obviously the deadlines are going to be different and custom.
Yeah.
But if somebody is coming on, say either as a retainer client or, hourly, from signing to onboarded, what's your timetable?
Depends heavily on the complexity of the product. So,
Okay.
broadly speaking, the hourly compared to the project based, the project based will take about 2.5 times as long to complete. for the same task. And that's purely because we need to be able to say, hey, we're sure that we can build it in this time frame. They won't have priority over ad hoc. There's a bunch of different metrics that play in there. For the hourly one, we basically move as quick as we can, because from our perspective, the way that we get compensated is through the success of our clients. And
Right.
the way that we get success for our clients is move quickly. Speed is king, right? Speed is one of the core fundamentals for my business model. And
Uh-huh.
if we're able to build out, like, what we do is we create a timeline of tasks. We build a pipeline of, hey, this workflow, this workflow, this workflow, this workflow, this workflow. Okay, all of these things need to be built. And then depending on the size of the project, we either assign a project manager or just a developer, or project manager and 3 developers, however, what suits, and they get working on it. We have the advantage that we can scale. Just like we're teaching what we're building for our clients is scalability options, right? For their company, our process is very scalable. If we have a client that needs 10 workflows built within the next week, that can be done.
Uh-huh.
Like, we have to be compensated for it, obviously, because we have other projects as well. Like, it's
Right.
priority process, but in effect, the timeline is more based on how quickly they're able to provide us with what we need than it is on Anthem's capability to take on the issue.
Right.
I've spent a lot of time, and I mean like the last while, building up this framework we have, our internal framework, and I call it TOO, and it's the way that we go about solving any automation problem. So T, that's trigger, O is operation, and the second O is output. So to start the workflow out, the solution we're building, we look at the trigger. So we ask qualifying questions about what should start this workflow? What's the reason for this habit, the reason for this workflow to run? Whenever we get a Stripe payment, whenever someone books in a meeting, whenever Tobias starts his workday, whenever this employee logs off for the evening, whatever, right? What's the start of the workflow? Whenever a form is submitted. Then the operation pieces. What are we doing with this data? Like, what's the actual value add this automation is doing? What AI piece do we add? What automation piece? What enrichment piece? What mechanism do we have? What unique mechanism do we build for this automation that is going to produce a result? That operation produces a result. That result needs to be articulated in some way. We need to quantify it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are multiple ways you can quantify it. You can get a notification on your phone. Ding! Trisha just logged off for the night. Magnus just started working today. Whatever, you can have a notification. You can have a dashboard saying, your average employee worked 2.8 hours yesterday with a 87% productivity score, and you finished 57 different tasks on your to-do list. A dashboard.
Right.
Or you could get a weekly report, or you could get a Slack notification. You get human in the loop changes, right? There's hundreds of things we can do. And what we need to do is to identify these 3 different metrics, TOO, trigger, operation, output, and then we're able to build out the workflow, because then we understand truly what the issue is.
Absolutely. So, I mean, dude, that's impressive, man, because this entire wave of AI is creating a whole new field of opportunities for people like yourself that can come in and want to understand it and want to use it, as you put it, to create unfair advantages. I mean, that's ultimately the entire goal of AI, is to not necessarily take over, but to increase productivity.
Yeah.
On the
the right
human side
things.
of things.
On the right things. Like,
yeah. And a lot of people just don't know how to do that. A lot of companies don't even know how to, especially smaller ones, that are really struggling and maybe don't know how to implement this kind of technology into what they're doing. That's insanely beneficial. So what you're doing, I'm sure, your clients are probably thrilled with. I know the work you did for me, I was super happy with. The So as far as, growth and scale, if I can ask, how many clients do you have now, and what's your, like, your peak? Where do you want to be, a few years from now?
So active clients, right, on this package here, around 10 active ones where we do active deliveries for them. In terms of where I want to be, it's a very interesting question. Probably north of like 100.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want like I have a knack for systems. I have a knack for getting structures in place, and I need it's more to learn the way to scale things than it is to necessarily. I've never cared about profit, and I've never cared about the money that I've earned from it. I've more cared about building something worthy, building something that's unique, and building something that like actually provides value. And I think money is a lagging indicator of solving great problems.
Mhm.
But I've recently had to learn, and this is from a co-founder of mine who's been bullying me for it. And he basically told me, "Are we running a non-profit here?" And, and I was like, "Well, hmm." And I had to kind of look in the mirror, and
You need that sometimes.
yeah,
It's it's
and
tough, man, especially when you spend a lot of time with your clients.
yeah,
So you develop, you develop a relationship, and you don't want to necessarily, you don't want to let them down. I mean, I did it my first year, with my main customer. My first year was brutal because I lowballed because I wanted the business.
yeah,
And then, here we are a couple years later, prices are up to where, they should
yeah.
be. Um, and we're going, but I mean, so I get it. I get it. Um, there has to be room for profit in a business. It's the old, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. You have to protect that to a certain extent. But at the end of the day, you do right by your customers. So when it comes down to it, the price justifies it. So, and as long as the output that you have
Is high
is
enough.
worth that price,
Yeah. I
that's what matters. You're selling a high level of service at a great price.
bargain, if
You
my
know,
mentor would say anything. I think it's because
yeah.
like you only like one of my core beliefs is that like you only get one name and you have to invest in it, right? Like invest
Yep.
in it properly. And the way
Mhm.
that I got my first business was through like leveraging my time, right? I have a bunch of time and I didn't have clients, so I would just work for
Mhm.
clients up front. And it's something that I have to learn now is if I want proper systems, if I want people who
Mhm.
are truly competent, if I want to work with the best, I need to
Mhm.
charge enough where I can even hire them, right? Like I think I sent you this on text, right? I've spent 3 grand the last 2 hours or something, and it's like I need to, like it's an actual issue, right? Like
Yeah.
uh, I mean I have good margins, so let's be clear about that.
Right.
But it's
The
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 amount of
the
risk you
amount
can
of
take
money
on.
you can spend very quick. Yeah, I mean, you gotta make sure your budget equalizes. Your revenue has to be there. So,
I did a post about this recently, and it's a Warren Buffett quote, and it's basically I posted it with like an automation build out that we had with like all the nodes being put out together. It's really, really cool. And the quote is, risk comes from not knowing what you're doing. And I find that to be true. I like taking on risk. And the reason I like doing it, because I do my best to know what I don't know. So being honest enough with myself to say, hey, I know this, I know this. I have these truth statements that are core beliefs. I know this to be true. But I know that I know jack shit about running meta ads for dental services, whatever. Like, I don't know anything about that, and I'm fine with it.
Right. That
And I don't
not
need
your
to.
wheelhouse.
Yeah, and I don't need to, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
Having that understanding is I don't know it. And I know that not knowing is the cause for risk. If I want to learn something, I need to do the inverse. And that is taking risk to learn what you need to do. And one of the advantages I think I've had, because I haven't cared that much about the actual money coming in, I've been able to, in effect, do what you would call risk all of it. But because I'm at least not from a poor family, I've never had issue with money ever, so I've never really valued it. So when I've risked it, it hasn't felt like risk to me because it was a natural step for me to improve. And what I see a lot of peers doing is they get a bit of money and then they just like store it, put it into some S&P 500 with 8% yield. Like, okay,
They take the easy way. You know, they take the easy way. A lot of folks do that. But, you know, like you said, you take the risk. You take the risk to learn. You know, I mean, that's kind of like my entire story wrapped up in a footnote. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing starting a business, and then, you know, here we are, you know, finishing up. You know, we'll be finishing the 3rd full year in March. And the amount of shit that I've had to learn
it's wild.
in those couple of years has been crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, the first year and a half was like a boxing match where I had both hands tied behind my back. It was brutal. I was taking punches like nobody's business my first year. And, you know, and every now and again I still do. I still take a couple, you know, hard hits to the face every now and again. But that's, you know, that's kind of life. My one business partner told me that, you know, owning a business and being an entrepreneur of any kind is like chewing on broken glass and staring out into the abyss, because you are constantly going to have to take risks and not know where it ends up at the end. You're basically, A, you have to trust yourself, and B, you have to be able to either complete the task or learn how to complete the task. You know, I mean, and even then you might not get your same end result, you know, so there's always a level of risk as an entrepreneur. And I think you have done a really fantastic job of pivoting when you need to. And I think that's a lot of what inspires me about you, because at such a young age, you have these lessons that most people can go a lifetime and not learn. And in this day and age, with the tools we have available, the resources we have available, more people your age and you know, coming up out of high school, you know, there's certainly plenty of opportunity for there to be millions of you, right?
Mhm.
If you were to speak to somebody today that was, say, 15, 16 years old, right? And they wanted to become an entrepreneur and start their own business. What message would you give them to help inspire them to chase that?
To inspire them. Yeah.
If you're talking to a 16-year-old, they're going to be like, "Yeah, I can't. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to own a business. Like I don't know what I'm doing." Like, what would you say to that person?
Greatness is the perception that virtue is enough. If you're virtuous enough for a long enough period of time, you will become great, per whatever definition you define it as. You just said having a business is like chewing on a glass, right? It's staring into the abyss, and the abyss stares back into you. You're effectively suffering intentionally for outsized return later. Suffering is one of the core opportunities to acquire virtue. So the virtue can be built through suffering, which is what, when you look at someone like Alexander the Great or Caesar or one of these people, the core distinctive indicator of their greatness is their ability to suffer for their virtue. Their virtue is not handed to them. It's not given to them. And be very clear. And this is something I heard on a lecture from Michael Zucker. And it's, philosophy is the great equalizer. You could be born a slave. You could be born the richest man alive. If you have the proper philosophy in place, you can still operate by the same rule set, and you can still acquire the same relative degree of greatness. Something along those lines. You can
No, that's
tear through.
that's actually perfect. And so, just to get sappy for a moment, the reason that you're on the first episode is because, like I said in the beginning, you're one of the most inspiring young people that I've had the privilege of meeting and calling a colleague. You do absolutely fantastic work. I mean, the results speak for themselves. You have such a unique position as someone in just, I mean, really in any industry. Um, to really go places. And I think you're well on your way to doing that. The way I want to close out all these shows is going to be the same way every show. I want you, in one line or one sentence, to describe what you do in the worst way possible. So for me, being in the delivery field, I tell people I'm a professional ding-dong ditcher. Run up to the door, ring the doorbell, and run away. So if you had to give the absolute worst description of what you do for a living, what would it be?
I allow you to be as lazy as humanly possible. Like you don't have to do shit. If at all possible, you'd be sleeping in your bed. Like, you don't have to do shit.
I mean, that's true. It is 100% true. Well, brother, thank you for this. This has been awesome.
Of course.
Obviously, before we dip out of here, tell everybody where they can find you, whether it's on LinkedIn, whatever socials you want to shout out, and then tell everybody where they can find your company.
Yeah. Most of my business happens through my LinkedIn, and you can just find that through my name. We are actually launching a fully new website that I've spent the last week building out. And at anthemagency.ai, anthemagency.ai, and you can find a VSL there that goes through and describes how you can book in a call with me or one of my sales reps, and basically build out through a 1-hour consultation a pipeline of automations that we can help you integrate into your company.
Awesome, man. That is fantastic. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you being here for this. And everybody else, we'll catch you in the next one.